Have you been stuck in a trial that has dragged on for months or maybe even years, and you feel like you're completely running on empty? You check your spiritual checklist every day, you're praying, you're reading, and you're trying to do your best. But the dark cloud over your home and the heavy anxiety in your heart just doesn't seem to budge. You find yourself asking, how long does spiritual warfare last? Because you're utterly exhausted from waiting for a breakthrough, from the quiet toxic whisper that has started creeping into your mind saying, this is never going to change. God has totally forgotten you. Well, my friend, do not believe that whisper. You are in the right place. And by the end of today's episode, you will understand the cosmic and individual timing of spiritual opposition. And you will learn how to spot the precise deception phrases the enemy uses to turn a temporary season of waiting into permanent spiritual despair. We're going to help you solve the challenge of feeling like you're in a waiting room, feeling exhausted, by showing how God uses prolonged seasons of stretching to help build up a spiritual immune system, and sharing a simple physical reset to shorten the adversary's daily attacks. We're moving from hopeless endurance to resilient authority. Stay tuned. Ordinary women, extraordinary faith. When God calls, we say yes. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Arise Women of God podcast. I'm so thrilled to be here with you today, joined by my co-founder of Women Warriors of Light, Wendi Christensen, who happens to be a licensed clinical social worker. And today we are tackling this exhausting question: how long does spiritual warfare last? And when we ask this question, we have to realize that on a macro level, this conflict is not new. In Revelation chapter 12, we learn that the cosmic warfare has been raging since the beginning of time, when the dragon was cast out of heaven and came down to earth to target God's people. But on an individual daily basis, the timeline of a spiritual attack varies greatly. In Daniel chapter 2, verses 12 and 13, we see a 21-day delay where Daniel fasted and prayed, hearing absolutely nothing. When an angel finally arrived, he revealed that God had actually heard the prayer on day one, but a massive spiritual battle behind the scenes delayed the answer. So my friends, trust that if you're on day 21 or 201, trust that God is seeing you and is opening up answers to you, maybe even with this podcast. Our individual battles can feel like they are lasting forever. Sitting in a prolonged trial can make us feel entirely abandoned, and that's exactly how the adversary wants us to feel. Wendi has noticed that one of the hardest parts of this journey is that our human clock rarely matches heaven's clock.
You know, when God gives us the prompting of this will be over soon, his soon is very different than my soon. And that makes it hard sometimes. So it's so hard to know how long that spiritual warfare is going to take. And sometimes there's a purpose behind it. And that's the thing I love about God. When you know the character of God, sometimes he's also working on resilience. God can take any difficult or hard thing, or even being attacked by Satan, and turn it into a strength. So even sitting in your personal waiting room can be a strength. For example, I dealt with 7 years of infertility. I wanted nothing more than to be a mom. It took me a long time to get married. And then I'm like, okay, let's start having kids. Well, it didn't happen. And year 1 went by, year 2 went by, year 3 went by. And of course, you start working with the infertility doctor and they do everything that they possibly can. Nothing was working. So come upon year 6 and I start learning that I need to have a procedure. And it kind of came to a point where I was like, really, God? And I felt so tired and exhausted and overwhelmed and just really sad that this was the conclusion that it came to. You know, I was in this space of difficulty. That's kind of when Satan weaseled his way in and was like, yeah, let's blame God. It was God's fault that you're in this place. You've been doing everything that you can. You've been following your promptings. You've been listening. And I went, no, I had to stop for a second and just look at, because it's easy to get into that place where you're really angry and you feel so helpless and you feel like God has abandoned you or he's rejected you or he's left you. Satan wants you to get into that space. And that's another tactic that he uses to isolate you from God. And we need to see that and recognize it for what it's worth. I know for me, I had to do some really deep soul searching and digging and actually turn to God during those moments. That's the time you really want to turn and face him because he's your biggest weapon in conquering the isolation, the worry, the feeling worthless. I can't do this, the burnout. God's the one who pulls you through that. And of course, Satan wants to keep you from him. And after 7 years, we were finally blessed to welcome a beautiful girl. And I know it was in that waiting room that I became resilient. It's almost like when when you're sick and your body needs to build up its immune system. I felt like that's what happened during those 7 years of waiting for children. God built my immune system when I thought he was tearing me down.
I love that clinical concept of a spiritual immune system. While some spiritual battles drag on for seasons to build our resilience, other daily attacks can be shortened significantly when we pay attention to our physical bodies. Just earlier today, I was hit with an unusually heavy mental block while trying to work on this podcast. I knew that by sharing this content on spiritual warfare, it's a way for me to share light and tactics that we can use against the adversary. And I think the adversary was trying to paralyze my entire day. He didn't want me to move forward. So after lunch, I executed a physical and a spiritual reset. I went out in my backyard to kind of ground myself, putting my bare feet on the grass, and said a prayer in my mind and in my heart. As I sat there running my fingers through the grass, letting the wind blow through my hair, and consciously rooted and grounded myself in Jesus Christ, I felt peace. And I also felt a quiet whisper from God. He didn't give me a complex theological answer. He simply whispered that I was running too hard and I wasn't getting enough sleep. The spiritual attack was capitalizing on my physical depletion. So I went inside and took a nap. I figured God said you need to rest, so I did. And when I woke up, the gloom was gone, and I could easily tackle this podcast. Sometimes taking care of our physical bodies is the ultimate way to conquer a spiritual attack. And God will inspire you to know what you need to do to break the current siege. So ask God what you need to do to win today. He will guide you. But my friends, when a nap or a normal prayer doesn't immediately lift the cloud, Scripture shows us that some spiritual strongholds require an entirely different level of intervention. In Matthew chapter 17, verses 14 through 21, a desperate father brings his severely afflicted son to the disciples, but they fail to cast the demon out. When Jesus arrives, he rebukes the enemy and heals the boy instantly. Afterwards, the perplexed disciples ask the Lord why they failed. Jesus tells them a two-part answer. First, it was because of their unbelief, explaining that, quote, "If ye have faith as a grain of a mustard seed, nothing shall be impossible to you." However, he also added this beautiful piece of insight that we can also use in our battles today. Quote, "Howbeit, this kind goeth not out but by prayer and fasting." Certain strongholds require us to escalate our defenses through fasting, or even asking a specific network of sisters who are prayer warriors to help pray the attack away. But regardless of the method, we must learn to identify the specific words the adversary uses to trap us in the timeline of why this is taking so long. And Wendy's going to share some insights on this right now.
In the opposition, I actually became stronger. And so I look at sometimes that opposition, I recognize it when Satan comes in and think, you're trying to tear me down and take me away from God, but I'm going to join forces with him and overcome and come out stronger. I'm going to use it as a strength mechanism, no matter how long the waiting is. So when it gets so hard and so difficult, and I know it does, and I know it will, keep turning to the Lord and don't let Satan overtake you and think that you're never going to get through this. It's never going to end. It's never going to change. Those phrases in and of themselves come from Satan. So we don't always know how long it will take, but we know when we turn to the Lord, He'll help us through however long it does take.
Oh, my friend, the adversary wants you to believe that your current dark season is a permanent destination. But God promises that morning will come and that He is actively using the waiting room to fortify your spirit. To help you navigate these prolonged seasons, track God's hidden movements and fortify your home when you are physically, emotionally, and spiritually drained. Wendi and I have compiled this strategic manual, a mother's spiritual defense guide, 6 empowering steps to fortify home and family. You can grab it free at the link below. When you download your manual, turn to step number 2, the catalyst principle, and look at the maternal not to-do list on page 11. It will help you prayerfully audit things that are limiting your sleep, your energy, and your schedule, so you can close the physical entry points the enemy uses when you are running too hard. Oh, my sisters, stand strong. Stand with God. You are a daughter of light, and you are a warrior of light. May you stand with Him as your general and king in this battle. And until next time, may you arise, do it God's way, God strong. If today's episode helped you feel a little closer to God, please like and subscribe.